But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Greetings, Supreme Gentlemen and Elite Whammon Gamers, and welcome to HBR News Special, because I'm a dipshit, number 156. Alek Minassian, Elliot Roger 2.0. I'm your host, Brian Martinez, and I am here with my patriarchal co-hosts to look at the feels, funnies, and what the fucks to discuss in this week's story, Slam Bam Badger style. Prepare your amygdala because we're going in dry. Before we begin, I'm going to ask that you smash that like button because it really helps our analytics. And if you haven't subbed, please do so. Finally, be sure to turn on the notifications bell so that you know when we go live. Now, let's dip our ankles in today's story. Today's Polecat panel consists of it's our Polecat Punster and Pussycat Punisher Hannah and Dr. Randomcam, Evil Panda, Puppet Master, Rabbit Long-Range Rhetorician, and me, the Supreme Doge in Charge. Max Darrett is not here today as he is not feeling up to the task. The story that we're going to be discussing has impacted him in a somewhat emotional way as he is a Toronto resident. So there is a Max Darrett-shaped hole in today's show. We do have a pretty interesting show for you guys today, despite the fact that it's only going to be one story, but it is a big one. So please continue the conversations both in the live chat as well as the comments section. We're going to be looking at the recent vehicular attack that happened in Toronto just the other day. And you may not know the story, so we're going to go into that. And why this is relevant to what we do here at HBR. And then after we're done discussing that, we're going to be talking about the fallout. I don't know if you noticed the recent Twitter suspensions that have been going around. I made a video about it on my channel, warning people that if you talked about Sawad Fares, that was the woman who accused Mark Pearson of sexual assault, of which he was completely innocent, and it was actually kind of impossible for him to commit such a crime. If you mention her name on Twitter, you will be suspended. And this is actually retroactive. There are people who mention her name in the context of the Mark Pearson case that have been suspended, even though they made their tweets years ago when people were discussing it. So we're going to be talking about an article on A Voice for Men that discusses this on the after show. So if you'd like to join us on the after show, either as an audience member or a participant, please consider becoming a patron to do so. That's www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find yourself unable to find our content because YouTube finally dropped the axe on our channels, please go to badgerfeed.com. That's badgerfeed.com. You should see it right at the top of the screen. So, thank you, Mike and Hannah, for coming on such short notice. We're going to be looking at the stories now. Or the story, rather. So, The Telegraph has written an article on this called "What Do We Know About Alek Minassian, Arrested After Toronto Van Attack?" The Toronto van attack suspect, charged with 10 counts of premeditated murder, has been described by his former classmates as a socially awkward student who graduated from his college course only last week. Alek Minassian was arrested after 10 people were killed by a van in northern Toronto on Monday evening. This was last night. The 25-year-old was taken into custody after the rented vehicle plowed into a crowd, leaving a further 15 people hospitalized, and also faces multiple counts of attempted murder. The video footage shows a suspect being handcuffed after a tense standoff with armed police. Authorities are still attempting to establish a motive for the attack, but say his actions were undoubtedly deliberate. The driver posted a cryptic Facebook message minutes before the van attack, police said on Tuesday night. Facebook has confirmed a message linked to an account matching Minassian was posted publicly before the social network shut down his account. The post referred to the Supreme Gentleman Elliot Roger, the California gunman who killed 6 people in 2014. The Globe and Mail spoke to 3 of Minassian's former classmates who describe him as being socially awkward, believing he may have suffered from a social or mental disability. Another student who worked with Minassian on a school project in 2015 expressed his surprise that the suspect was even capable of hiring and driving a vehicle, adding that he didn't know how a steering wheel worked when he knew him. Ari Bluff, who went to secondary school with Minassian, recalled that he wasn't overly social when she knew him. I'm not sure if he had any very, very close friends, at least publicly, he told CBC News. I never saw him with a group of friends, generally. But whenever we would see him in the hallways, we'd always speak to him or say hi to him or whatnot. I remember seeing him probably just walking down the halls, usually by himself or in the cafeteria by himself. He recalls Minassian's behavior as being usually quite strange, and he said he made people feel uneasy around him. However, he never noticed anything violent about the suspect. Minassian was also regarded as an IT expert at school with comprehensive knowledge of computer chips, according to his former classmates. His name is listed as a developer on a number of apps, including one that found parking spots in the Toronto area. A college classmate who wished to remain anonymous told BuzzFeed, oh, I'm so glad you went to them, he was extremely bright and said that he couldn't imagine him doing something like this. NBC News cited American and Canadian law enforcement officials saying that mental illness was a leading theory for a motive rather than terrorism. There's a picture of Minassian. So, I guess before we get into it, there are other stories, but I thought I would let Hannah and Mike chime in with any of their thoughts before we move on to the next sort of like take on this. There is a mention of Elliot Roger, and this is the reason why I thought this was definitely a story that we needed to discuss. So I give you guys the floor if you want to say anything.
Well, I know how many of our listeners are familiar with exposingfeminism.wordpress. They've got a page called the Catalog of Anti-Male Shaming Tactics, and I noticed a few of them in there. The big one was oh, you can't get laid, you're socially awkward, nobody wants to hang out with you. This kind of goes along with the not the charge of endangerment, but the charge of bitterness, and I can't remember which color. They're all color-coded. But basically the idea is, the individual is bitter, is angry. It's code red, charge of irascibility. And they're going to portray him as being pissed off because he couldn't get laid. They're going to portray him as being bitter because people didn't like him, and then they're going to associate that with the men's rights movement because they've been accusing the men's rights movement of that as long as there's been a men's rights movement. You know, it only bothers you that you don't have the same custody rights as a woman because you're bitter, you're angry about not getting laid.
Yeah, Hannah, could you turn your volume? Could you turn your volume up a little bit?
Yeah, I've got my mic up as high as it'll go. Hang on a second. Let me see if I can. Sometimes, of all things, Audacity, even when it's not on, affects the volume, the outgoing volume.
Oh, shit. We did forget that, didn't we? Damn.
Yeah. I didn't even start Audacity. I completely forgot about Audacity.
Yeah.
So tonight we have no Audacity. And holy crap, it doesn't even have... Oh, there it is. I was going to say, oh, no, my mic is way up in Audacity. I don't understand why I'm quieter. My mic is my little volume thingy on my mic is turned up as high as it'll go. And is this better? All I did was reposition the mic so it's below my mouth instead of above it.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, I did some stuff on my end too. All right, let me know if that sounds better, guys.
Okay, so going on, so you have this, you're bitter, you're angry, and that all that stuff about them just going on and on about, you know, how and his lack of self-esteem. That lack of self-esteem, I think, kind of goes along with that. The idea that, you know, and then the charge of invirility. Well, they turn it around on people. They usually say, "Are you gay? Or I need a real man, not a sissy. You're such a wimp." But in this case, it's he's being portrayed as such a wimp that if people were mean to him, he'd just go along with it. And that tells me this is they're basically trying to use shaming of the humanity and the aspects of humanity where the way we respond as human beings to the way other people treat us in terms of masculinity. Men are not allowed to have those aspects of humanity. They're not allowed to have inappropriate to women's needs, I guess, responses to how other people treat them. So if other people are cruel to men, if other people isolate men, if other people you know, basically bully men or socially reject them and so on, men are not allowed to be as upset about that as women are allowed to be, are expected to be. And that's where they're going in the beginning of this. And I guess the big, let's see if I can find that spot in the news story. They're not saying they could. They said they couldn't figure out a motive. His motive was to kill people, obviously.
Obviously.
I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory there. But
well, we can see what CNN has to say about it. He said with a cringe in his back.
Well, which one were you reading first?
I was reading the Telegraph.
Okay, that's why I couldn't find the other thing I was going to respond to in the CNN story. I don't know why I was thinking. Well, they're also, you know, going on about him being an IT expert and so on. And then they're not knowing how. That seems like
a weird thing to include. The fact that he's like some IT expert, but I guess they were just saying, well, this is what we know about him. I mean, that's the name of the article, so I guess it's just information about the guy.
But it strikes me as an attempt to portray socially awkward nerds, basically, as being more likely to engage in violence like this. There's hundreds of thousands of socially awkward nerds out there that have never done anything to anybody else.
Oh, but absolutely.
Apparently this guy is representative, and they're not.
Yeah. Okay. I guess unless there's anything else, I'll go ahead and see what CNN's part of the story is, and then we'll look at the last thing is the BBC's take, and then we'll talk. We'll go through the CNN article. Talk about that a little bit. Go through the BBC one. Talk about that a little bit, and then we'll close it out, basically. So maybe because I think they have slightly different, information, or some of them have some different witness testimonies and things like that. So, all right. CNN's article is titled "The Toronto Van Suspect Apparently Lauded an American Mass Killer." Toronto authorities said that they have no previous interactions with him, but a U.S. law enforcement official said Minassian had been known to authorities. A former classmate said Minassian often succumbed to peer pressure, such as running down a hallway shirtless when dared by other students. The classmate, who didn't want to be identified, said they bonded during special needs classes at Wyndham Ridge Public School and Thornleigh Secondary School. The classmate.
Actually, I want to interrupt on this one because
go ahead.
In the previous story, they said he wasn't overly social, right? But he'd go along with it if you said rotten things to him. And in this one, it says he'd succumbed to peer pressure to do ridiculous things.
Yeah.
Do you see what that kind of says there? You got some people saying he didn't seek out friends, and then you got other people pointing out, like, that's something that somebody would do and he was in special ed. Somebody
Yeah.
exploited a special ed student by making him embarrass himself using peer pressure that they knew he would succumb to.
Yeah.
What does that tell you?
I don't know. Well, what would you say?
That's bullying.
Oh, so you mean say he's being bullied into doing stuff to be accepted? Is that what what you're getting at?
Yeah, you ever read Flowers for Algernon?
Oh yeah, but I was like 11.
Oh my god.
I read
Okay,
it though,
so
but that was a long time ago.
one of the things that really struck me it was a short story, but it was kind of a long short story, Flowers for Algernon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's told from the perspective of Charlie, this guy who was intellectually disabled. He was severely intellectually disabled, and he was working and as the janitor at, I can't remember if it was a factory, but it was at a place where other people worked as well. And he was the butt of their jokes, like totally the butt of their jokes. And he would always laugh along with them because he didn't know any better. And these scientists did this experiment on him to raise his cognitive abilities. And he became more and more capable of understanding what was going on around him. And one of the things that struck me in the story was he hit this point where he recognized that he was the butt of the jokes that he'd been laughing at. And it wasn't funny anymore. He was embarrassed. And I'm sitting here thinking, a lot of people are in special ed for things other than being intellectually disabled. I've known people that have been in special ed because they have severe dyslexia. I've known people that have been in special ed because they've had emotional problems that interfered with their ability to operate in a regular classroom, severe ADHD. You don't necessarily have to be limited in your cognitive function to be in special ed. But if you have emotional problems and you're in special ed because you have emotional problems and you happen to be one of those people that's very socially awkward, but you really want to be liked, and students are doing stuff like that to you, and you're the butt of the joke, and you went through your entire school career dealing with that regularly, that would wear on a person. It wouldn't justify what this guy did, but it might explain some of the contributing factors.
Yeah. No, for sure. That's a good point. Okay, so moving on. The classmate said Minassian was very self-deprecating. If you put him down or disrespected him or insulted him, he would agree with you, the classmate said. Minassian also had severe anxiety when interacting with females and would freeze, unable to respond, the classmate said. He was genuinely terrified with interacting verbally or physically at all, except for his mother, classmate said. So that's just the additional information that the CNN story gives us. It's not much other than what we know, where he says, "All hail the Supreme Gentleman Elliot Roger" on a Facebook page believed to be Minassian's. And this is, of course, a reference to the guy who killed 6 people in 2014, most of which, by the way, were men, one of which was himself. So it's just a little bit more information, so I think that you're making an interesting point. And the thing is, though, what I'm trying to figure out here, because I know there's a lot of people saying that the reason he did it has to do with him being an incel. And that he is just sort of like, I guess he's reached some peak of frustration with it or something, but who's to say? Like, I don't know. I don't know that there's a motive that's been sort of clearly stated. But I do know that if this is the kind of coverage the story is getting, then they are going to, the feminists are going to use this to make the toxic masculinity arguments, the anti-MRA arguments, and so on. I hope that there's some pushback on it, but expect it. It's coming, is what we're going to get. So,
Well, one of the things I think we need to do as a movement is don't let them get away with trying to associate advocates for due process rights and advocates for the rights of rape victims, even if they are not the rape victims that general society has sympathy for, and advocates for the rights of children to have relationships with both of their parents. Anti-abuse advocates, don't let them associate that with some guy who was not at all involved in the movement by way of associating him with another guy who was not at all involved in the movement. And their only means of associating them is that those guys, they can actually say those guys exhibit some of the things that they have used to falsely slander the MRM in the past. It needs to be pointed out that they are using slander and lies to oppose advocacy for children, advocacy for rape victims, advocacy for domestic violence victims, advocacy for due process rights, and advocacy for bodily autonomy in terms of circumcision. And that's the main counter. And this is a situation where women have power again. Women have the power to basically determine how people are perceived. Women have the power to determine who is accepted in society. And it's always been that way, and it's probably going to be that way throughout our entire lives. I don't see that changing. That's something that needs to be pointed out, essentially. This is an abuse of female power to use lies like this to try to prevent advocates for civil rights and for genderless consideration for human rights from doing what we do.
So Tyler Preston in the chat said, "Oh God, you guys should see how the cocksuckers at Comedy Central are covering it." Can you tell me just like in brief what they're saying? I'm just curious. Also, Hoki Bukisa gave us $10 in a super chat and said, "Men, if the petty shaming tactics still work on you, look up Building Up Your Ability to Go Without Love or Approval." The video, I guess it's a video entitled Building Up Your Ability to Go Without Love or Approval. It could help you move past it. Every adult male should be able to. Well, yeah, I think that the need for approval, not just from women but other men, is something that I think everyone could benefit from resisting. So yeah, I'm with that. Definitely we need to get away from that, because this is like when you succumb to peer pressure, isn't that what you're doing? Is you're looking for approval from peers, like from friends, so that they don't pick on you anymore, or they accept you as one of their own or something like that. I mean, I don't know the guy's reasons. It sounds to me that he has issues that he needs help with, and maybe he's not getting. But again, I can't speak to the motives. I don't even know that the incel one has a lot of legs on it at this point. So, I guess I'll go ahead and look at the last story. This is about incels in general. So, this is BBC Trending. Toronto van attack, what is an incel? Reports from Canada say the suspect in the Toronto van attack made a reference to incel rebellion on Facebook. But what exactly is an incel? Facebook confirmed to the BBC that Minassian was the author of a post which read in part, quote, "The incel rebellion has already begun. We will overthrow all the Chads and Stacys. All hail the supreme gentleman, Elliot Roger," end quote. The post also contained a reference to the message board 4chan, the hacker known as 4chan. This is a screenshot of the tweet. It says, "Private Recruit Minassian Infantry 00010. Wishing to speak to Sergeant 4chan, please. C2324961. The incel rebellion has already begun. We will overthrow all the Chads and Stacys. All hail the Supreme Gentleman Elliot Roger. Incel is short for involuntary celibate, and in particular refers to online groups of men who feel that they can't enter into sexual relationships. The attitudes of men who visit the boards vary widely, but online they frequently... The attitudes of men who visit the boards vary widely, but online, they frequently vent anger against sexually prolific men, called Chads, and women, called Stacys. More generally, incel forums often include rants aimed at feminism and women. Incel forums also, albeit sometimes ironically, include praise for Elliot Roger, who killed 6 people in the rampage through Isla Vista, California in 2014 before turning the gun on himself. Roger left a rambling manifesto detailing his sexual frustration and his hatred of women and minorities. All right. So that is the brief version of that BBC story. So go ahead.
That post is so... That post is cringy. I'm sorry. But
yeah, for sure.
It almost looked like something somebody would write if they were trying to parody or like if they'd never been on 4chan, but they were trying to pretend they were involved with 4chan. It just seems so fake.
Yeah, no, it does. It seems like he's being trolly. It's hard to know for sure, right? I mean, they have been able to confirm they wrote it, but I think it's one of those things that people may take seriously. Maybe they should, but I think they may take it literally. And it's just, I don't know. It's just hard to know, you know. I obviously, I don't condone anything that he's done. I think nobody here would, but I would like to understand it. Like, the thing is that I actually really care about incels. Like, I want to help them, you know. I think that they're in a bad position and they may not be able to get out of it. Like, there's a, you know, it's possible that you may not be selected for reproduction. There's a chance that this is a chance that's true of many people. But what I hope to do is to help them to be okay with that, to be able to live with the possibility that, you know, maybe you're not going to find somebody, because there's this thing that goes around that says there's someone for everyone. But I think it's more realistic to be able to live without it if that's what it comes to. And maybe you just try to better yourself for its own sake. And when you do, you may actually find someone as a consequence without actually trying. You know how they always say, you know, you always find love when you're not looking. I think that it's kind of true in that if you're actually just doing you and taking care of your business and, you know, accomplishing your goals and like taking care of yourself in a way that no one else can or should, then you actually increase your chances of meeting someone because you're not concerning yourself with meeting someone, if that makes sense. You're actually bettering yourself as a person. And I wouldn't want anyone to come to this. Now, obviously, 99.9% of incels are not going to do something like this. I don't even know for sure that him being an incel is the reason why this happened. I think that there are people trying to like make connections, but we don't know. We don't have a motive yet. But I'm going under the let's pretend that that is the reason. Well, this is something we should prevent. Well, how do we do it? Well, we got to help men, you know, be better men, like help men like that be better versions of themselves is what I'm saying. Not necessarily be better men, because then you have to measure that. And how do you do that? Just help them be better versions of themselves. You know, show them compassion, look out for them, talk about their issues. Try to let them know that there are people that care, you know, about their health, about their well-being. And this is not something that is a men's rights issue in that it's not a right, but it certainly is an issue, you know, a men's issue that we would like to address. I would like to try to help as many as I can. So when I see this, it's if this was the reason, and all of this was, you know, completely unironic, not trolly, you know, this guy was just clearly like messed up. I think that it just shows that, you know, where some people might say this is toxic masculinity and we need to like teach men to be more like girls, or we need to like essentially double down on the shit that we're doing that's creating this situation in the first place. I'm going to ask that we try to help these men in another way, in a compassionate way. You know, talk to them, reach out to somebody that you know that's a guy, if you or anybody for that matter, right? But if you know a man and you know he's been alone a long time, and you know that he's suffering, or he's just suffering in general, you know, reach out to him, see how he's doing, talk to him. You know, it's like when I was doing something with a show with Allison, and we were talking about the Parkland shooter, and Allison said that for every one Parkland shooter that, you know, goes and shoots a bunch of people, there are 40 that shoot themselves. So there are way more men that are in need of help than those that actually go out and hurt others, because the overwhelming majority hurt themselves, and in a pretty, you know, permanent way. So I don't know what else to say about that, but
that's actually a really salient point. It is this is one of the things that's reprehensible about society, that it takes someone exploding, you know, basically on other people, someone who actually goes out and hurts other people, before we figure out that there can be a problem with maybe the emotional fallout and the psychological fallout of being socially isolated, and before we figure out that men are not exempt from that. And feminism's solution to feminize men is actually probably the worst thing they could possibly do.
Yeah. Essentially, they want to cage. They want to cage masculinity.
No.
You know.
The worst thing that could happen would be if we combined men's proactive approach to problem solving with women's sense of entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
That would be incredibly dangerous. You know, women are entitled as fuck. Women are sexually entitled as fuck. This is why women make the news for glassing men in bars after they've asked them out and the guy has said no, or they said, buy me a drink, and the guy says no. We don't have news stories like this where they turn around and say this is toxic femininity and so on. It just makes the news, and then everybody moves on. It barely gets reported. It barely gets any attention at all, and there's no analysis of what it is about femininity and what it is about the woman herself and what it says about other women and so on. It's just an incident, and gee, isn't she a psycho bitch? And moving on, here we got a guy who is accused of taking this action specifically because he's entitled, right? That he supposedly has been denied social contact, and his response is to act out on an alleged sense of entitlement.
Yeah.
And not frustration, right? Not hurt, not pain and suffering, not however it interacted with whatever mental health conditions he has, because they've already said he looked obsessive compulsive, which doesn't necessarily lead to people killing people either. But clearly he couldn't possibly be a broad matrix of characteristics and experiences and, you know, attitudes and pressures and so on. No, he's just a one-dimensional guy who can't get laid, so he got mad and went out and hit a bunch of people with a bus of peace. It just, this is the total package here in terms of the difference between between men and women in society. A woman can be normal and extremely sexually entitled at the same time. A woman can be violent over her sexual entitlement, and everybody's like, what a psycho bitch. A man who is violent, and there's any hint at all that it has anything to do with any social factors, and oh my God, he's representative of all men, and oh my God, he's representative of men who want to be treated like human beings and who are fighting for human rights considerations to be applied equally, and oh my God, he's entitled to women, and so on, and we must all panic and scream our fool heads off. The difference is quite telling in terms of how men and women are viewed in society, and oh my God, the danger that it would pose if men were not like men, and the vast majority of men were not shocked at this kind of behavior and appalled at this kind of behavior and did not rush to distance themselves from this kind of behavior. Can you imagine, just for a moment, if the majority of men were as sexually entitled as women? Yeah. We would live in the rape culture of feminist imagining, and there would be incidents like this every day.
Well, maybe they want that. I mean, like maybe they know that by feminizing men or shaming them or attacking masculinity consistently, they create a climate in which more and more of these kinds of destructive men come about, which means they need more feminism. So we gotta, keep going. I mean, I know maybe they're not. I'm giving them too much credit, but I mean, what if that's true? What if it's on purpose, in order to basically destroy everything, so they can be the victim of everything? So somebody asked, I have a super chat I should read, but somebody did ask a question. Beta Mosquito gave us $10 Australian and said, slightly related to male disposability, a solemn Anzac a solemn Anzac Day to any Aussies and Kiwis listening, lest we forget. So like if men keep killing themselves or killing other people, then feminism gets to keep saying that there's something wrong with men while breaking them. It's like, it's that meme where you've seen the meme where the guy, the comedy show guy, shoots a person dead and then turns to the camera and says, why would blank do this? It's like feminism shooting women and pretending that the gun is men, and then turning to the camera and saying, men, why would men do this? Or shooting people in general. And that's another thing too, is that we are going, remember, this is going by the assumption that people think that his motive comes from the fact that he's an incel, or comes from the idea that he's an incel, where we don't actually know that for sure. It just so happens that one of the things we do know about him is that he, maybe ironically, praised Elliot Roger in a tweet that he made, and made this ridiculous post about the incel rebellion, etc. But we don't know that that's what his feeling is. And the thing is too, is I'm actually having a hard time finding a date on when he made that tweet. Because if that tweet's old, then it may not have anything to do with this. It just says 1 hour, but 1 hour from when? I actually have it on the screen, right? A screenshot of it.
By the way, I think it's not a tweet; it's a Facebook post.
Oh, it is a Facebook post, yeah. But I don't know when.
Yeah, and the evidence has been removed now, so
yeah,
how do you know?
I don't know how relevant it is. I'm sure it was collected for evidence or whatever, but I don't know when that post was made. I don't know if it's like just before he did what he did. So, okay, what I'm saying is maybe, it's hard to say, but maybe blaming the fact this guy is incel for him driving over a bunch of random people, not women specifically, but just random ass crowd of people with his truck, is the same as blaming that woman who went into YouTube and shot up YouTube. That's like blaming vegans.
Remember her name, by the way? Does anyone remember her name? No, everyone's
No.
already forgotten. It's only
Yeah.
been 3 weeks and everyone's already forgotten a name. I hope that happens this time as well, because I think that's the way it should be done. You got to forget these people's names and personalities as soon as possible. I don't even know why we make their personalities famous.
Yeah.
I don't know what the point
Been
is.
doing it for centuries.
It wasn't
Everybody
it's-
still remembers who
obviously-
Jesse James was.
Nassim.
If there's a Nassim something or other.
Yeah.
it's-
But you're right. It's actually been theorized that part of the reason these things keep happening is because of the publicity that the killers get.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been 1 week. No, I'm kidding. It's been 4 years since the Elliot Roger thing, and we still know his name. And the reason, part of it, is because of the media. You know, they won't let us forget Elliot Roger. In fact, I don't remember the Parkland shooter's name. I don't remember the guy at who shot at the crowd in Las Vegas. I don't remember the Vegas shooter's name. But I still remember Elliot Rogers. It might just be because of the work that I do and how Elliot Roger is relevant. But yeah,
Elliot Roger keeps getting thrown in our faces. Over and over again.
Absolutely.
There is that.
No, absolutely. But yeah, I think blaming the incel community for this guy is the same as blaming vegans for Nassim. You know, at least at this point. I even made a joke about, you know, her doing that because she was a vegan, but I didn't actually believe it. So I don't know. I guess it's just too early to know for sure.
Well, one thing
fix
that
your
we can
audio.
do-
What's wrong with the audio, Captain Wrong Think? I don't know. He's saying there's something.
I don't know,
wrong.
but you faded out there for a minute.
Oh, it could
I
be.
thought you were done because I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I don't know. All right, well, go ahead, Hannah.
Well, I was gonna say, were you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Oh, okay. I didn't want to interrupt.
He says
Just
it's
because
popping.
I lost the sound. Oh, great. Well, this is just a night for fun error things like that to happen, I guess. Now, one thing we need to be able to do is remember that when people confront us with stuff like this, people tell you, you know, MRAs are violent. Elliot Roger was violent. This guy was violent. Minassian was violent. What you got to be able to do is turn around and say, what evidence do you have that they were men's rights activists? Because we hear all the time from feminists that we can't call feminists who have lobbied for gender discriminatory law, criminal law no less. We can't call them feminists. We can't call Mary Koss a feminist. We can't call Gloria Steinem a feminist because they're embarrassed by what those women did. But there's evidence that they were. Gloria Steinem was the president of the National Organization for Women, the largest feminist organization in the United States. She published Mary Koss's work. There's actual physical evidence we can point to and say, hey, these people are feminists because they were involved in feminist initiatives during the second wave. What evidence can they present that Elliot Roger was a men's rights activist? What evidence can they present that Minassian is a men's rights activist? And when they direct you to We Hunted the Mammoth, then you can post Judgy Bitch's article on comparing David Futrell, writer of We Hunted the Mammoth, to the gay cannibal killer from Canada.
Mm.
Can point out the fact that he has no evidence presented in his blog tracing back to actual men's rights activists, and is in fact equating men's rights activists with pickup artists and attributing behaviors to pickup artists that he cannot prove are pickup artist behaviors. So here you have a situation where you've got no evidence that can be presented, that cannot be countered. And that's basically the way we have to deal with this. Where's your evidence? That's not evidence. It doesn't contain the elements that would make it evidence. You know, and until they can come back and say, here's a post by Minassian in Voice for Men forums. Here's an archive of it. Here's a post, an article published by Elliot Roger on this or that men's rights site. Here's a membership card to this group that calls themselves men's rights activists. That's recognized by other men's rights activists as a men's rights activist group. Like if all they can give you is David Futrell, as far as evidence is concerned, they're fucked. The other thing is, if you get somebody that is telling you this shit on some place like Twitter or Facebook and their only source is David Futrell, look at their associates, because they might be. He has a following that consists of what I like to refer to as red herring trolls. And what they basically do is they have a set of talking points that all lead back to his articles. They're all very badly flawed talking points. They usually involve logic fallacies. And they will take you in sort of a spiral through all of those talking points and continue to repeat them while never addressing yours. Never addressing your answers, never addressing your counters. If you knock one peg down, they just throw up another one. That they're not there for debate. They are there to distract you from your activism. And the last thing I want to say in terms of dealing with being accused of association with these guys is that's what this is about. Distracting you from your activism. No matter how many people throw this at you, no matter how much you see it in the news media, no matter how much you have to hear about it, don't let it stop you from moving forward with what you do. If you write to your legislators about proposed equally shared parenting legislation every time it comes up, keep doing that, and don't let stuff like this take away from the time that you spend on that. If you share information on social media that highlights men's issues like male suicide and due process rights and unequal treatment of victims of intimate partner and sexual violence and circumcision and stuff like that, keep doing that. Don't let this distract you. That's a lot of what this is about.
Yeah.
It's intended to knock us down. It's intended to shut us up. It's
put us on the defensive, keep us on damage control, whatever. You know, fighting battles that aren't ours, basically.
And anytime that somebody replies to something that you're doing along those lines with this, you know, your question, don't even bother with the nuh-uh factor. Just ask, how does that make male suicide irrelevant? Or how does that make it acceptable to put innocent men in jail? How does that make it acceptable to deny children contact with one of their parents? How does that make it acceptable to deny bodily autonomy to half the human race? And by treating it as a lesser crime when one sex violates the other sex's bodily autonomy through various forms of abuse if the perpetrator is female. And if they can't answer that question, they're not relevant, and you just keep talking. And that's it. Don't let it distract you. Don't let it keep you down. Don't let it shut you up. Don't let it stop you from fighting for equally recognized human rights for both sexes.
Yep. Well said. Mike, do you have any final thoughts on this story at all?
No, I'm still being pretty careful with what I say because there's so much shit we don't know.
Yeah.
Something smells fishy, but all I have is fifis at the moment.
Yeah, I understand that.
You don't want to hear about those, do you?
Well, I mean, I'm okay with that, but I hear what you're saying. Like, I'm trying to be careful about what's true. That's why I'm going with, okay, let's assume this is true, so now what? But the fact is, we don't have enough facts. But that's never stopped the MSM from slinging shit, so that's the one thing you got to be prepared for. Tyler Preston gave us $5 and says, feminists seems to have pedophiles among their groups like Lena Dunham. Yeah, well, you have a point. There is definitely a lot of that. And, you know, I would say that I don't know much about this guy. And what I'm about to say doesn't really have anything to do with him anyway, but it's just a general statement, okay? We should not be waiting until, as Hannah said, a man explodes and kills a bunch of other people before we decide to help. Because there are plenty of men that just kill themselves. And there are lots of guys in our lives, in our circles, that are probably in pain and need somebody to tell them, to listen to them, okay? if you know anyone that you think, you know what, you don't even have to suspect it. Just check in on your male friends. Just check in on guys in your life, in your circles, at your job, in your class, whatever. See if they're doing okay. Just say, hey, you know, how are you? You wanna just like shoot the shit with them. You don't have to be too forceful. Yes, even male feminists, even the guys that you disagree with on gender or whatever, because the thing is that, like, it's gonna sound crazy, okay, but I actually care about male feminists as much as I care about any other guy, you know, in terms of, like, I want the best for them and I want them to be happy, because the fact is that, you know, when it comes to male feminists, they're actually the closest in proximity to landmines without knowing it. And I know a lot of times they get involved with that because they want the favor of women. That's a joke that we tell, but there is something to it in that they need somebody to tell them that they don't need to get that validation from that ideology to have value. So look out for them as well. You don't want an Elliot Roger situation as much as you don't want a suicide situation, as much as you wouldn't want a Russian Deadpool situation. You know, you just look out for each other. Just talk to a guy, see how he's doing, even if he hates you, even if he's sure that, you know, you're in the wrong side of history. Just be compassionate anyway, because you never know when, you know, I have a friend who is basically an incel, and he's been depressed for years. And I know that he's considered, you know, suicide multiple times. I know this because he's confided it in me in the past. And I'm glad that he started to watch our shows. He might even be watching right now, and if so, I hope he doesn't hate me for bringing this up, even though I'm not going to mention any names. But I want him to realize that he has value without women's approval, and he doesn't need it. And I hope that these stories of men that, you know, and this is whether this Alek Minassian thing is true or not. I'm just going to talk about incels in general. You know, these kinds of men, they need to know that they're worth something, and they shouldn't be in that position where they want to hurt themselves or do worse, or worse than that, try to take everyone down with them. I know that it can be easy to hate society when you think that society hates you. But, you know, if I can, I want to try and change one person's mind. And I would ask you that you guys try to do the same. You know, that's all I got to say about that.
Well, I can say one thing about the conditions that apply here. I guess you can say feminists have fought long and hard to make success in one's endeavors, one's business endeavors, one's athletic endeavors, and so on, not a measure of self-worth. That if you try really hard at something and you achieve the improvement you wanted, you achieve the position you wanted, you achieve the record you wanted, whatever, but even just get your best time in a track meet, that can't be a standard for feminists of achievement and of self-worth, because then it makes women who don't do as well feel bad. They fought long and hard to eliminate that. Well, that was the main thing, besides whether or not women are interested in him, that a man had to measure himself by. Was not necessarily social recognition for it, but meeting those goals and achieving those ends and achieving that improvement, achieving that you know, this is what I set out to do, and I have conquered it. I have accomplished it. And taking that away is probably, in my mind, I think that's one of the things that has led partly to the suicide epidemic. That men can't think of themselves as worth something because they met a goal. Men can't think of themselves as worth something because they wanted a thing for themselves and they earned it, or because they did a great job in the workplace, or because they managed to improve their time running their circuit in their neighborhood. That they're not allowed to celebrate those things because it pisses feminists off. And all they have left is, I'm only worth something if women think I'm worth something. Now, if feminists don't want women to be objects of interest like that, and they've said they don't, which I don't believe, but if that were true, then they ought to fight for allowing everyone to measure themselves to a degree by their accomplishments. And it doesn't have to be everybody knows about this accomplishment and worships me for it. It doesn't even have to be, I got a nice little award, or I got a raise, or my boss said good job. It can be, I know that because I did my part of this project right, the project was a success. And that's enough sometimes. And I think men have the right, women even have the right, even though women don't do it very often, both sexes have the right to focus on this kind of accomplishment and to measure themselves by this kind of accomplishment. And we need to get back to that. We need to get back to people understanding the importance of that degree of success. We need to get back to people understanding the importance of setting goals and measuring yourself by what you achieve. Even if it's not huge, even if it's just personal goals, it matters. And I don't know, all of the fits that people are having over this. Somebody's got to mute because I'm hearing myself.
I'll mute myself, but I'm not sure if that's me.
It's coming back and I'm hearing it, and I don't think I have this open. I honestly, I can't tell where I'm hearing. All right, well, I'm not going to be able to continue my train of thought with this.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know. It's not me because I'm muted.
All right, I'm going to try deafening myself in Discord and see what happens.
If you do that, Hannah, then you can't. Nobody can hear you.
Yeah,
it's
that
like,
automatically mutes me too.
It mutes
you can't
too.
Yeah. Well, crap. Okay. Well, anyway, the upshot of it is, I think that part of the reason that if this kind of path that's being traced out, among incels is in any way resembles what feminists paint it as. I think the fact that they have worked so hard to take away men's sense of achievement at accomplishing their goals and at the prestige basically, and the self-esteem associated with business achievement, with work achievement and things like that. That's a huge contributing factor.
Yeah. Okay, well, we should definitely wrap up then, and we'll go on to the after show. Hey, we did this in an hour. It's like a regular ass fucking news show, yet it was just thrown together at the last second. That's on me. That's my fault. I misunderstood some stuff we were planning. So, but I think this was a very good show, and it actually kind of struck something personal with me, so which is kind of weird. I have a couple of super chats I'm going to read, and then I'm going to close this out. Field of Bears gives us $10 and says, feminists don't care about rights. They're just a Marxist wedge designed to distract us from the fact that socialism always ends in starvation and genocide. Tyler Preston gives us $5 and says, I am resigning my American citizenship in order to live in Latveria. Is that the place that Dr. Doom rules over? I hear that they have socialized healthcare, and it's quite good. America is beyond hope at this point. I mean, it is ruled by a doctor, after all. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up the show. I want to thank you guys for joining us on this HBR News special report. I want to thank Mike and Hannah for being so nice and kind enough to come on with me and talk about this story, which I think was very important. And I honestly didn't even want to wait very long to discuss it because I felt like by the time Thursday rolled around, the narrative would have likely spun out of control. In fact, we're probably going to have to follow up on this very soon in one way or another. So thank you guys for coming on the show today. Leave us your thoughts on this story and like the stuff that we discussed. And like I said before, reach out to a guy in your life anywhere and just let him know that you're around and you're willing to listen.